The greatest amphibious assault in history began on the morning of June 6, 1944. Thousands of Allied troops, backed by tanks and other armored vehicles, poured out of the landing craft. They stormed the beaches of Normandy in northern France. This was D-Day. Its aim was to liberate occupied Western Europe and drive Hitler's armies back to Germany. But despite the numerous men and resources at their disposal, the Allied commanders knew that difficulties lay ahead. They were particularly worried that as the Allied invading forces came off the beaches, they might face deadly German Panzer divisions. If so, the outcome of the battle was far from certain. But in a spectacular piece of military misjudgment, Hitler took direct control of the Panzer reserves. He refused to allow them to move without his permission. Hitler always slept late and no one dared wake him. So it was several hours before Hitler released the Panzers to confront the enemy. By then, it was too late. The Allies were firmly ashore, and the opportunity to drive them back into the sea was lost. Hitler's catastrophic blunder was about to cost Germany the battle for Western Europe. If the Panzers had been there as the Allies came ashore, the battle might have gone the other way. In July 1940, Hitler launched his invincible Luftwaffe against a smaller British Air Force. His objective was to gain air supremacy over southern England prior to his invasion of Britain. But the German Air Force failed in its mission. Hitler's plan to subdue England was hindered. He and his high command then looked east and prepared to crush the Soviet Union. To guard against any future invasion from the west, Hitler began building a fortified defensive line along the French coast. This was the beginning of the Atlantic Wall. At the beginning of 1942, following U.S. entry into the war, thousands of American troops crossed the Atlantic and began arriving in Britain. They had vast quantities of equipment. Hitler was alarmed. He accelerated work on the wall, ordering that it should stretch from Norway to the Franco-Spanish border. Huge resources were committed to ensuring its impregnability. Despite this, Hitler was still mainly preoccupied with the war on the Eastern Front. German troops deployed to the west were either low quality and unfit or exhausted after being mauled by the Soviets. This worried and frustrated Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, veteran commander-in-chief of Germany's armed forces on the Western Front. Von Rundstedt had no faith in static defense systems like the Atlantic Wall. He urged Hitler to commit more men and equipment to the west. He realized it would take more than a line of concrete and a few big guns to repel an Allied invasion. It was not until early November 1943 that Hitler realized the Allies would attempt to cross the Channel. He began to pay more attention to defending the Western Front. He ordered the strengthening of the Atlantic Wall along its entire length. More men were assigned, and a great deal of heavy artillery was moved into position. At the same time, Hitler gave Field Marshal Erwin Rommel the responsibility for checking defenses from Denmark to the Spanish border. At the beginning of 1944, Rommel reported that despite the improvements, the Atlantic Wall still needed to be much stronger to repel the Allies. Hitler responded by giving Rommel immediate command of Army Group B in the west. He was now responsible for what was considered to be the most vital part of the invasion coast, from the Zuider Zee in Holland to the Loire River in France. The autocratic von Rundstedt was still commander-in-chief. Even though he was initially suspicious of Rommel, he was prepared to give him a free hand. Rommel now strengthened the defenses against the invasion, which he knew was imminent. At the time, the Germans still believed that the Allies would land close to a port in France, rather than on beaches. Calais or Boulogne were favored, where the English Channel is at its narrowest. Other possibilities were Cherbourg and Le Havre. The Allies, however, had mounted an elaborate deception plan, Operation Fortitude. It was designed to convince the German High Command that the main Allied invasion would be at the Pas-de-Calais region. The Germans thought the Allies might also come ashore in Normandy, but they believed that this would be a diversionary tactic designed to draw German reserves away from the area north of the Seine. At the same time, there was a heated debate within the German High Command about how the invasion should be held back. The main counterattack would obviously be led by the Panzers, but the question was how this would be achieved. Hitler's compromise satisfied no one and was a fatal blunder. It would change the course of the entire war. The German High Command prepared to meet the anticipated Allied invasion in northern France during 1944. Erwin Rommel argued that the Panzers should be spread out along the Channel coast so that they could counterattack as soon as the Allies came ashore. He was convinced that if the Allies were allowed to consolidate their beachhead, they would be impossible to defeat. Rommel was sure that the first 24 hours would be crucial. If the Allies were not quickly displaced, it would be impossible to withstand their buildup. General Gerd von Schweppenberg, commander of Panzer Group West, took an entirely different view. He argued that the panzers should be concentrated inland so that they could strike once the main landings had been identified. After listening to both arguments, von Rundstedt agreed with von Schweppenberg. News of the disagreements began to filter through to Berlin. General Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Armor, decided to pay a visit to the Western Front. He was appalled by Rommel's plans to move the panzers to the forward line before the invasion took place. This meant they would be dispersed, making it difficult for them to concentrate for a decisive counterblow. Guderian complained to Hitler about what he described as Rommel's stubborn attitude. But Hitler was in no mood to hear one of his most admired generals criticized. He suggested Guderian return to France and take the matter up with Rommel himself. So Guderian, accompanied by von Schweppenberg, went to meet Rommel at his headquarters in La Roche-Guyon. There they both forcefully tried to persuade Rommel that the Panzers should be held back for a decisive blow. But to their annoyance, Rommel pointed out that neither of them had any recent experience with the sheer material strength of the Western Allies. Given their enormous resources, especially air power, Rommel said it would be almost impossible to drive them back into the sea if they established a beachhead. The arguments between the senior generals began to worry Hitler. He decided to intervene. Of the 11 Panzer and Panzer Grenadier divisions available, 4 were allotted to Army Group G, responsible for the defense of southern France. Rommel's Army Group B had 3 divisions, which were located in Holland, the Pas-de-Calais, and Normandy. The remaining 4 divisions were von Schweppenberg's Panzer Reserve. Hitler made no changes in the positioning of the panzers, but he ordered that none could be redeployed without his permission. This applied especially to the 4 divisions in von Schweppenberg's Panzer Group West. Hitler's solution to the problem robbed von Rundstedt of control of his vital panzer assets. It also failed to please either Rommel or von Schweppenberg. It would be a critical blunder in Germany's defense of Normandy. Throughout the spring of 1944, Rommel concentrated on strengthening and extending Hitler's Atlantic Wall. He knew that what Hitler really wanted was an endless line of fortified garrisons. But that was a practical impossibility. In fact, it was only in the Pas-de-Calais area that the Atlantic Wall was anything like its intended form. And Rommel was still not sure this would be the starting point of the Allied invasion. By March 1944, the Allies enjoyed complete air supremacy in the West. They began softening up the Germans by destroying major road and rail links in northern France, attacking Luftwaffe airfields, and bombing the Atlantic Wall. Toward the end of May, there was a massive movement of men and armor to southern ports on the English coast. Soon, the huge Allied invasion force began boarding for the short journey across the English Channel. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight Eisenhower had scheduled D-Day for June 5th, but he was soon faced with an unanticipated problem. When the first ships set sail, the weather still seemed favorable. But things began to change. Eisenhower was warned about a severe depression on its way. It forced him to postpone the invasion for 24 hours. The Germans were shocked when the Allies began to land in France. They believed that the weather conditions were still very bad. Many senior officers were not at their headquarters, including Rommel, who was in Germany pleading for reinforcements. As the Allies started to come ashore, von Rundstedt tried to get through to Hitler by telephone. He needed Hitler's permission to release the panzers. Because he worked late and rose late, Hitler was still in bed. No one had the nerve to wake him. Meanwhile, the 1 Panzer Division near the landing beaches, the 21st, had been deployed by Rommel to cover a wide area. It was struggling to regroup for a counterattack. It was not until the afternoon that the 21st went into action against the British troops. They were advancing from the most eastern of the 5 landing beaches toward the city of Caen. Hitler was finally informed of the situation by mid-morning. Hitler refused to give von Rundstedt control of the panzer divisions. He would only move 2, the 12th SS Panzer Grenadier and the Panzer Lehr divisions, closer to the coast. But their deployment was to be controlled by Hitler's headquarters in eastern Germany. Aware of the rapid Allied buildup, von Rundstedt continued to ask for the power to control the panzers himself. Hitler finally agreed in mid-afternoon, but by then, it was already too late. The 21st Panzer Division alone could do nothing more than slow the British advance on Caen. Nothing could be done about the Allies moving inland from the other beaches. As D-Day drew to a close, the leading elements of the 12th SS Panzer Grenadier Hitler Youth Division hooked up with the 21st Panzer Division. But by then, it was beginning to get dark. Nothing could be done. The following day, the movements of the rest of the 12th SS Panzer Grenadier Division were severely disrupted by Allied air attacks. The other panzer divisions tried to reach the front as quickly as they could, but they had other problems. The pre-D-Day air campaign on road and rail communications and continued Allied air activity imposed serious delays. The French resistance made conditions even worse by sabotaging bridges. It took some of the panzers nearly 2 weeks to arrive. By that time, the Allies had consolidated their beachheads and were increasing pressure on the German defenders. The result was that as the panzer divisions arrived, they could only struggle to hold the line, not make a decisive counterstrike. Even so, they put up a spirited defense as they fell back. It took the Allies almost 2 months to break out and advance into the heart of France. But Most German soldiers realized much earlier that it was a hopeless cause. They knew the battle for Normandy had been lost almost before it began. Hitler's critical blunder in not releasing the panzers until it was too late meant his troops didn't stand a chance. But if they had been able to mount a concentrated counterattack within the first 36 hours of the landings, there was a good chance they could have driven the Allies back into the sea. D-Day might have had a very different ending.